but universally, all the Jewish communities set up. So then you start. So what I want to just shed light to make you start questioning every statement they said. Just as a pathological liar, you don't believe one word, and in order to believe it, you try to prove it's true. That's what we're trying to present to you. Zionism and all its actions that emanate from the state is out of a pathological, illegitimate movement. And that is how you have to address it and look at this. Again, that doesn't mean to say that all the Zionists are bad people, all the Zionists are people who ignored the religious Jewish people in the time of Hitler. There were people who gave their lives to help it. We're looking at the movement in its entirety, the whole concept of what Zionism is. Some people really just had nationalism. Others, they came along and they did believe in this concept. They said, it's how to do. Oh, we have. So the mainstay of the movement was they needed nationalism. They just looked for a way to be able to gain legitimacy. So they started talking about religion, but they were able to ensnare people who are gullible. And many masses of Jews, unfortunately, today, and even then, the vast majority of Jews were non-religious around the world. So they were, and they played on their ignorance of these Jews. So they said to these Jews, we're the beginning of God's redemption. And these Jews knew that every year throughout history we prayed to God to leave exile and that we should come. So they prayed on, they prayed on this P-R-E-Y. They prayed on these people's their failings that they want to return, and they said, you see that? We're the beginning of God's redemption. Knowing, these leaders knew quite well that this is not God's redemption and it's forbidden, but they played on this concept, and they knew they'll be able to sell it. It would be easy to sell amongst all the Jews who are thrown out from this land and from that land, and are desperate for a place, and this land, they'll be able to sell this plan. And they knew, even more than that, they'll be able to turn to the Christian, the evangelistic Christians who open the Bible and says, oh, the children of Israel, God, you're blessed if you bless the children of Israel, and they gave them a land. So they knew they'll be able to gain support from the millions of evangelistic Christians. Of course, the evangelical Christians have no idea whatsoever that according to the Jewish religion, that we're totally forbidden to create our own entity, even 1 inch of our own sovereignty. And knowing that at that time, that the Christians had as a general rule around the world, had no idea about the Palestinian communities and how the Zionists formed their state. They played on the lack of knowledge, the lack of news, that they had the mic in their hand for over 60 years, from the beginning of the 20th century till the creation of the state, and further, in knowing that the people have no idea about the Palestinian communities. And after Hitler, they just added to that the fact of the Holocaust, and that's why they're busy with the Holocaust. We could be busy with the Holocaust. We lived the Holocaust. My grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My father escaped, and just barely escaped to Italy, and from there to the United States. All our relatives. Rabbi Rosenberg, his grandfather, who's on the picture of this book, he's one of our leading rabbis, was in a bunker he was hiding in Hungary, and until the end of the war, in a bunker. He's one of our leading spokespeople. It's in our blood, the Holocaust. Our closest relatives were murdered in the Holocaust. Yet the Zionists, in order to push that, and I grew up in a religious home where we say Kaddish for our relatives, and we talked about it, but it never entered our mind that we should use this Holocaust and rebel against God. But the Zionists, who don't say their prayers, who have nothing to do with God, all of a sudden they're taking these Jews who died because they were Jewish and who gave their lives to remain Jews. They could have sent their children to convents and to other places, to Christian families, but they said no. We want them to remain Jews because if they're going to continue to grow up ignorant that they're Jews, and they're going to transgress the Sabbath and all these things. It's better that they die as Jews, and that's the Jewish concept, that if you make somebody sin, it's worse than if you kill him. The soul is more than important than the body. They gave their lives. There's people alive today who bear witness that their parents took their children and took them with them to the camps rather than giving them to non-Jewish families. And that's a fact, and we're proud of it. Because to make one sin is worse than if you kill him. And here, so the Jewish people gave their lives for the fact that, so it's in our blood, the Holocaust, but we didn't use the Holocaust to rebel against God. And Zionism comes along, these people who didn't circumcise their children, who flaunted God's Torah in his face, and God forbid, just really laughed and scorned and tried to uproot Judaism. They all of a sudden come with our dead grandparents, the bodies, the millions of Jews who died, and they're using them to rebel against God, to gain support for a state that is built, predicated, it is a rebellion against God, a heresy built on the fact that it's a blasphemy, that claiming every day that God can't protect us, we have to have a state, using a land that's stealing every day, has uprooted a people, the Palestinian people, stolen their homes, stolen the homes from people from Gaza. People are dying. People now, when they just attacked Gaza, it was 2 years ago, so 1,400 people were killed, over 5,000 people were injured. No, that's totally wrong. Every single person in Gaza and in Palestine and around the world was affected, was scarred for life. God forbid a person shouldn't know what it means when you see a relative who has to be pushed around in a wheelchair, or you see something else, a person damaged, missing a limb. The whole family is ruined for life. How many people are emotionally destroyed? Everybody, all why? Because there's something called the state of Israel that has to exist. Everything gets sacrificed on this altar of Zionism. And they use the Holocaust and every other type of Jewish issue, the Bible and the Holocaust, where Jews were murdered because they were Jews, and they use that to get good support and sympathy from the world for their state. But you should just know that it has nothing, on the contrary, we are certain, and there's no question about it, that if they would rise from the dead, our grandparents, they would be the first to be standing up, and they were the first at the time when they were alive at the beginning of Zionism. They stood and they said, we are to serve God and we do not accept Zionism. They never accepted Zionism into their communities. So the whole concept of Zionism, the state of Israel, it's in every facet, it's a rebellion against God in its existence, in every action that emanates from it. The Jewish people have stood in opposition to Zionism, and people have no idea of this either. But we have, if you look at our site, www.nkusa.org, we have pamphlets. Since day one, since Zionism, before the Palestinians realized who they were, we knew who they were because they were amongst the Jewish communities in Europe. And they were ostracized, they were forbidden. We banished them from our communities in Europe. But these people came up to Palestine with a whole other issue, not just to move there. The Palestinian people, as in all the Muslim countries, were gracious hosts for the Jews. Were there ever pogroms there? They were. Were there ever pogroms in Europe? Of course they were. Yeah, so the fact is that the Jewish communities flourished in all the Muslim in countries, and for hundreds and hundreds of years. And then the Zionists came, and the Palestinian people were just as gracious, and they helped, and they sold houses, they sold to the Jewish people. But all of a sudden this movement came, people started coming to Zionists with their insidious, their movement, they wanted to take over the land, make the state of Israel, and the Palestinian people didn't realize, so they started selling them housing, not knowing who they're dealing with. And the Zionists came, and they started building their movement, and all of a sudden the Palestinian people realized that these people have a plan here, that they want to take over, rule over the land. And then it brought, and then there was the fighting, we could get into a little what happened there, Darfur, and excuse me? Yeah, no, there was there was a bunch of towns. There's well over 200 towns. There was very famous towns over there. Well, anyway, in Palestine. But whatever it was, they came and they made massacres there, the Zionists, because all of a sudden they started having these fighting when the Palestinian people realized they're being conned. And these people are not coming to buy houses; they're coming to take the land. So then all the fighting started at the beginning of the 20th century. The Jewish people immediately knew who these Zionists were because they knew from them from Europe. And they started demonstrating. They started fighting them from day one. Since then, they were brutally beaten. Till today, this picture is just a few months ago. We have books like that. You can show you more and more pictures. You can look at our site, nkusa.org. You will see how the Jewish people from our communities, tens of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of people, thank God they're still living there, who are anti-Zionist. And they go out, they demonstrate, and they're brutally beaten by the Zionists. Nobody talks about it, nobody speaks about it, nobody knows about this. And this is ongoing, and Jews, maybe the first famous martyr was a Jewish person. His name was Dr. Dahan. He came from Denmark in the 1920s. He was a diplomat, very close to the king of Denmark, a poet, a very famous person, and he decided to become a repentant Jew. He was a Jew, and he picked himself up and moved to Palestine in the 1920s because he felt to be a true Jew, he would have to embrace Zionism. And he went there, and he became friendly with the heads of the Zionist movement. But it didn't take long, because he was a very brilliant person, and the person was looking for the truth, and he realized that the very religious community is anti-Zionist. So he became friendly with the chief rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Sonnenfeld of blessed memory. So he said, look, everybody's just misunderstands. They have no idea what's going on. And he became his representative. He was a diplomat from Denmark. He knew the ins and outs of the political world. So he took him and he introduced him to the king of Transjordan at the time, of Hejaz, Abdallah, I believe, king of Hejaz, of the grandfather of the king of Jordan today. And he introduced them. They sent over a letter of loyalty. And they really just made a connection together with them, King Hussein of the Hejaz. And this was in 1924. And they gave her a letter of loyalty and friendship and so forth. But then he turned around and he said he's going to go to Britain, and Dr. Dahan, and he's going to inform, and he's trying to get us represented there, that the world should know the true face of Palestinian Jewry, that they oppose Zionism. The Haganah went, which was the terrorist group of the Zionists, and they turned and they said, if you're not going to cease and desist, we're going to assassinate you. And they assassinated. It's their own records. It's not refuted by the Zionists. It's their own records today that they assassinated him in front of Shaare Zedek Hospital in 1924, July 1st, 1924. And so maybe the first famous martyr was a Jew, and the record goes on and on. All the ones who were very outspoken, rabbis, many of them were murdered, and many of them were brutally beaten till today, arrested, brutally beaten. This goes on every single time. We constantly demonstrate till today. The world doesn't know that. But it's extremely important to understand when people intimidate you, they attack you. Oh, you're anti-Semitic. You're anti-Semitic. Say, listen, if you have an open mind, you have a few minutes, then we'll talk, we'll discuss it. How come, like I said, you start talking about the fact that the very religious communities oppose it. And the very religious communities in Palestine are standing there and being beaten for opposing Zionism. So we're anti-Semitic. How come the very Jews who are living there are opposed to the state? And so you see that has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. So what we're trying to do is shed light. You should not be intimidated by what the Zionists are claiming. Their whole plan, their issue is to, as I say, transform Judaism into something totally different. The nationalism, and they sacrifice on that the Palestinian people and the Jewish people who are true to Judaism. This is ongoing from then till today. And just one other note, the chief rabbi of Palestine in 1947, this was 1 year before it was ratified, is the chief rabbi at that time, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who I mentioned before, had passed away already, and the next rabbi, his name was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. And he, in 1947, wrote a letter to the United Nations, and we have the copy of it. He said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was in July 1947, a declaration before the United Nations. Then in November, he saw, and his community, and they saw that they're being ignored totally, and that the United Nations is backing the Zionists, and they're going to create a so-called Jewish state. So he sent another letter in November 18, 1947, to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and he wrote, the Jewish Orthodox community, the Eid HaChareidis of Jerusalem, comprising 60,000 souls, objects to the plea of including Jerusalem in the Jewish state or its residents becoming automatically citizens of the Jewish state. Our community demands that Jerusalem be an international zone under your protection with full autonomy, and its residents be free citizens of the international zone of Jerusalem. We beg of you not to take any action before receiving a memorandum which is being sent by airmail, Chief Rabbi J.Z. Dushinsky of the Ashkenazi community. He pleaded, he said, if I see you ignoring us, And his student, by the way, was Rabbi Leitner, of blessed memory, passed away 2 years ago or something. He was my rabbi, and we interviewed him many times. He said he talked about this, how the United Nations sent a delegation before ratifying the state, and they sent it to the Muslim community, the Christian community, and they sent it to the Jewish community, this delegation, and they approached the Rabbi Dushinsky, and he begged them, we don't want a Jewish state, but they were ignored. And then he sent this letter, he said, at least leave us Jerusalem. I have 60,000 people under me here. Leave us Jerusalem. This was the indigenous Jewish population of hundreds of years. They were, and even the leaders of Zionism, I have letters from a German general right after the Second World War. He wrote about German maneuvers. It was printed in Haaretz, a very well-known Israeli paper. He said, the vast majority of the Jewish people were anti-Zionist. He wrote, maybe 5% were Zionist, he writes, and they were fanatical, the Zionists, and they were brutal when they used force against the rest of the population. Again, to be seen on our site, we have that article. This is a fact. The Jewish community that were living for hundreds of years, nobody went up to Palestine. The Jewish people gravitated to Palestine for hundreds of years, not to make a business. It was a very poor land. It was people, rabbis, throughout the hundreds of years, when they wanted to, they retired rabbis, and they would take along a few students, and they would go there to live off their life in holiness, because it's a very holy land. And this is how the community developed. It became the Ivy League of Jewish people living there. It was the most God-fearing community, Jewish community around the world. They were from the different factions. They were Hasidic Jews and whatever, Lithuanian Jews, whatever. It was the most holy area, conglomeration of Jews from around the world, from hundreds of years, who lived there to serve God. And all of a sudden, the Zionists came. They were nothing. They weren't reckoned, but they were a tremendous threat to the Jewish community. And they created a rabbinate to fight Zionism. And the chief rabbi, Rabbi Dushinsky, pleaded with the United Nations, says, we are the Palestinian Jews. What do you want from us? If I would tell you further, so many different stories, Britain went along before the creation of the state, and they insisted that they were having so many problems over there because of the Zionists who were coming. And then they turned around and they said, they gave a decree that the Muslims have to be registered by their mosques, or whoever was the leader over there, the caliph, or and the Jewish people have to be registered by the Zionist organizations. It was unbelievable. And we pleaded, we said, Dr. Hahn and others pleaded with them finally in order to be able to free themselves of being under the Zionist rule. This was when Britain was ruling the area. But the Zionists were powerful. They took over the land. But they didn't really take over the land because it's God's land. And we know that it is forbidden for us to have a state. We know, and we know that the proper rule over the land belongs to the Palestinian people. And this is the true Jewish view that was shared then and held then and has never stopped and exists till today. People have no idea. This is not only in Palestine, but you can see, we have again on our sites, you can see literally tens of thousands. Just now, we went to, when Netanyahu came, we went to Washington. We have every year, we have tens of thousands of Jews who go demonstrating. Anti-Zionist Jews. You can see it. It's never reported in the main media. Why isn't it reported about? Why are we ridiculed? Why? It's very simple. Because that is what's convenient and that's what's popular. Because just like this AIPAC, and AIPAC, if they see anybody, a politician who speaks too pro-Palestinian, American-Israeli Public Alliance Committee, they have this conference there in Washington once a year, and everybody comes, Democrats, Republicans, the president, the vice president, the majority leaders, the minorities, everybody comes and bows down. It says, you know, it shows their presence to show support for the state of Israel. Why? Because everybody is fearful. If anybody dares to speak too sympathetically for the Palestinian people, they're committing political suicide. Paul Finley, a congressman, wrote a book about this issue, and there's many more. There's in Atlanta, there was a lady, she spoke out to us, she lost her job afterwards, for political office, she couldn't run again, I mean, she lost, basically. And that's what happens to anybody who dares to speak. The same thing is with the media. If the media, we make demonstrations constantly, tens of thousands, it would be much more if it wouldn't be for the attacks, the vicious attacks of the Zionists. But even the ones that we make, and we have tens of thousands of people, never gets covered by the mainstream media. Why? Because the reporter thinks about it. He says, If he writes in a newspaper, it gets edited out. The editor, they realize that they get threatened. There's called media watch by the Zionists. They threaten them that if you're going to report on this, then we're going to just contact the people who are advertising in your paper. And that's what they do. They're very efficient. They concentrate on anybody who stands in the way. After we make demonstrations, they come there openly. They take pictures of the people and they find the face that they know. They say, oh, he works for this and this company. They contact a company that does business with this company. Says, we can't do business with you. Why? Because you do business with that and that company. So the guy calls up the guy and says, look, I can't, I'm going to lose millions of dollars because you have somebody who went on a demonstration. You have to see that it shouldn't happen again. So and they do this constantly. Jews who go out and demonstrate invariably lose their jobs. And there's other intimidations. If it wouldn't be for that, then you would have rabbis here in California, students in our schools. You would have laymen, hundreds of thousands who would speak up, but people are fearful of being outspoken. This is the fact of life, that Zionism intimidates, and the main issue is to condemn everybody of being anti-Semitic. That anybody who stands up against them, you're anti-Semitic, we're self-hating Jews, and you're anti-Semitic. And they don't give you the opportunity. Their system of their ploy, their mode of attack, the modus operandi is to attack. So instead of being on the defensive for what they're doing to the people of Palestine or they're doing to the people of Gaza, they've stolen their land. So what do? Oh, people of Gaza, they're anti-Semites. They want to kill every Jew, which is totally not true. We went a delegation, we went more than once, we constantly go. We had a representative in the Palestinian Authority, Rabbi Hirsch passed away also like a year or two ago, and we were connected with the people of Palestine. We went to Gaza, a delegation of rabbis, to visit in Gaza, and we brought medical aid, and we were embraced by the people of Gaza, by the leadership in Gaza. And they said that we have nothing, and there was a press conference that was well attended by Reuters, by BBC, by all the major media, and they said one thing: we have nothing against the Jewish people. We were embraced by the people in Gaza, a whole delegation of rabbis who dressed obviously Jewish, and everybody was friendly almost in its entirety, and the leadership, Ishmael Haniyeh, everyone, they said one thing: we have nothing against the Jews. We will want to live in peace. We simply don't want to be occupied. But of course, they're vilified. They're the villains. They want to kill every Jew. And the victims is Zionism. It's not true. The picture is on its head. The Zionists have invaded and taken the land away from the people. We give the example. If let's just say, God forbid, the Nazis would have taken over France, and it would have existed till today, God forbid. France had freedom fighters. They had the resistance movement. Now, we're not condoning violence in any manner. That's not the point. But the French resistance used bombs, they did things, they did everything. Now, let's say today, so many years have passed, over 60 years, so the world leaders would say to them, look, you have to stop. It just can't go on like this. And they would say, okay, we're going to stop. We're not going to put any more bombs. We're going to make peace with the situation. So then the leaders would say, but there's one other thing. You have to stand up there and make an announcement that you recognize the legitimacy of the Nazi occupation of France. What would the world say? Everybody say, that's despicable, that's terrible. What do you want from them? They're saying they're not going to put any bombs. Gaza, after the election, they said to Hamas, they said, we're not putting any bombs, we're stopping, we're going to do, and again, we're not condoning violence in any way we're saying, but no, you have to say that it's legitimate, the state of Israel. What's the difference between that and the Nazi occupation? Why do they have to recognize the state of Israel? It's just unbelievable, it's unfathomable how the mind has been twisted, the people have been given, and it's just like accepted. Yeah, they suffered, the people in Gaza suffer, but they brought it upon themselves. They're just very stubborn. They don't want to recognize. Why should they recognize a land what's been taken from them, that it should be legitimate? So, and we've approached both then till today, and we meet constantly, and we've gone to Lebanon, we've gone to Sabra Shaltil, and we've met with the leaders over there, and everyone insists, from the Hezbollah to the Hamas, to every single one, we have nothing against Jews, we want to live in peace. What is the problem? The problem is the occupation. And the truth, that's what we're saying as Jews. The Torah states that we are forbidden to rebel against God, and it says if you will try to rebel against God, it will not be successful. Lama Savar, it says, verse, why are you going transgressing the words of God? V'hu they will not be successful. Over 60 years they've had this accord and that, and the Oslo Accords and the Y Camp and